Okay, so episode three, the trajectory continues into a slow downward spiral of misery for everyone who cares about Halo. And I just want to bring up something else before I even get into the episode that happens with a lot of franchises like Halo. For the people that like the show, would you still like it if it wasn't called Halo? If you would, then great. Go have fun. But for everyone who only likes the show because of the franchise that it falls under, this is why we keep having franchises get ruined. Star Wars, Lord of the Rings looks doomed. I've heard the Star Trek people are really pissed about Discovery and Picard. The Wheel of Time fans sound pretty displeased. The MCU and DCU are just garbage nonstop with a rare, decent one from the MCU. And it just drives me crazy watching people simp for these corporations and saying things like, we should just be grateful we're getting content from this franchise. Or, oh, it's just a bunch of toxic fans and grown men crying. This mentality makes me kind of wonder, like, what kind of self-respect do people have for themselves as a whole? These movies and series and games are getting made because we, the customers, have spent hundreds or thousands or even more on these franchises. We've invested our time, we've invested our emotions, and these corporations are making money off of it while shitting on everyone who made it possible for them to make money off of it in the first place. I think it's just important to remember that it's their job to handle the franchises with enough respect to the lore and care about telling a good story to earn our money. It's not the customer's job to defend corporations for shitting all over the fans who gave them the platform to begin with and then ask us for money to do it. And if you like something that's bad, just say it's bad and you like it. People trying to defend how this show's good just because it's Halo, even though it's not canon. I mean, the mental gymnastics are astonishing. All right, well, now that I'm done with that rant to get started, let's get into the actual episode. So we start with a flashback of the blonde chick working for the Covenant, and we find out that her name is Maki. She's on a tier 2 salvage colony, and it's essentially a homeless ghetto where they all live on piles of garbage. So she's with her friend, and they're reading a book, and they're about 10 years old. And the cops show up and start chasing them, and the Covenant shows up, and people are freaking out. But the cops are still chasing these two little kids. And then a cop tases her and beats the shit out of her for no reason. And, we get more just really subtle and really well written political commentary from this show. I can't imagine the parallels that they're trying to demonstrate here with their opinions of the police. If you're not super deep, then you might not get it. So the cop is like digging this taser into her just to be a piece of shit. And the elites show up with some magic device to find the blessed ones. And this begs the question, if they have this magic device, why don't they have a horde of these blessed ones instead of just this one chick? So anyway, they take her and we cut back to the future where she tells the prophets that she'll bring them the demon's head and the artifact. And the demon is obviously the Master Chief, or as this show prefers, John Halo. So we cut to Miranda Keyes. She's looking at the artifact. They say it's over 100,000 years old, and Parangoski wants her to study it so that she doesn't need Halsey anymore. So Halsey's clone wakes up and has Halsey's memories, and they talk about the Spartans, and Halsey tells John that Cortana is the only thing that will allow him to fight again. So they keep the clone awake but paralyzed while they suck her brain out, and here we get some more unnecessary and weird changes from the canon that I'm not sure how they'll end up making sense in the show. I mean, they don't make sense pretty much right away, but in the long run, if the show has a long run, which I don't foresee. And also, we get some more male piece of crap characters in the show, where Halsey's male assistant tries to kiss the clone while she's paralyzed like a fucking weirdo, but then Halsey walks in and interrupts him because he wasn't even a moral character. He just had to be a piece of shit on top of it. Just like every guy in the show has to be a piece of shit, I guess. So in the lore, Cortana is not the first smart AI. They're not super common, but there's been a bunch, and they know how they work and their limitations and stuff. And they're from dead people's brains who donate them. So they, in the show, they suck her brain out into a needle, like liquid form, and inject it directly into John's brain, instead of into a chip that goes into his armor. So she can't be removed from his head now. And I guess this means that if the show did go long enough, that they would never be able to do anything with her rampancy or anything else like that comes with the smart AI, because then John would have to go crazy too, or they would have to separate her back out somehow, which I don't see how that's possible with the way they did this. And I'm sure the show will be canceled before this becomes an issue anyway. So So Cortana is able to project herself like right away, and this makes no fucking sense to me because she's projecting her hologram from his brain somehow, and he doesn't have the armor, so there's no like electronic interface. Well, I guess I didn't even just say he doesn't have his armor because obviously in this show he never has armor or a helmet. They also mentioned that John was physically the best Spartan, which is really annoying because he was like an above average Spartan who just had a knack for winning and was always determined to win. And Halsey refers to him as the bravest. And that's what made him special. It wasn't that he was just the most gifted. And there's even a part in the books where they talk about him suspecting that Fred deliberately always came in second because he didn't want the attention of being in first place all the time. Kelly was supposed to be the fastest. Sam was the biggest. But, fuck it, I guess. Why stick to the lore when you can just change it for no reason? So we cut back to Quan in the rubble. Venture says Madrigal no longer wants independence. Soren gets a shipment of chickens and stuff. So I guess this sort of addresses that question of like how do these people live in an asteroid belt. Quan wants to go back to Madrigal and fight. Soren says no, so she calls him an asshole. And he says, as a courtesy to John, I won't crush your skull, which I liked because it was nice to see one of the Spartans be like, shut up, kid, which is how it should be. He says, get back to the house for dinner. So we go back to John, who's awake now. He doesn't want to meet Cortana, and he wants to know where she goes when she isn't on. We cut to the UNSC patrol ship, and if it seems like I'm jumping around a lot, that's because that's just how the show is structured. It just cuts every couple minutes, scene to scene. So we're at a UNSC patrol ship, and a Covenant Corvette comes out of slip space next to him and is just floating essentially dead in the water, or dead in space. Maki calls over the radio for help and pleads that they send a shuttle to her, and then we see that she has a hunter with her. And we go back to John, and they have him and Cortana touch the artifact, and Cortana tries to put him in stasis, but as soon as she does, it deactivates. And she complains that she can't just control him outright. And I don't know what sense any of it makes that when he's touching it but asleep or unconscious that it doesn't work, but when he's conscious it does. Who knows? It's all just unexplained space magic. So we go back to Maki, and the UNSC patrol ship greets her with a full squad of people, and they frisk her, and then they welcome her aboard. And then a bunch of hunter worms come through the walls and the vents and attack. And then she walks in slow motion through the middle of this whole fight with these hunter worms killing all these UNSC people around her who are firing on the hunter worms. And no one shoots her, and she doesn't get hit by any stray bullets. So this is purely just they wanted her to look cool, and fuck it if it makes sense. So the hunter worms kill everyone except for the captain, and she interrogates the captain about John, and he refuses to answer. And then she has this little like mini energy sword, like pocket knife that comes out of her finger, and she stabs it into his forehead. It's only like 2 inches long, but I have no fucking clue how that works. We cut back to FleetCom. John is walking around the base, not in his armor, and everyone stares. And John tells Silver Team, ask whatever they want, and he'll answer any questions they have. And they just say they trust him implicitly, which I like. That's appropriate for the Spartans. And then Cortana projects herself and talks to him. And John tries to turn her off, but he can't. And he's like, oh, it's temporary, even though we know that it's not. So we cut back to Quan, and she's with Soren's wife and kid. And his wife tries to tell her, don't just waste your life trying to go back and fighting and dying for no reason. And then Quan just says, well, I have to. So we cut back to Cortana and John. And yeah, this show jumps around like a ton, like I said before. So we cut back to Cortana and John. She tells him she can help, and he's annoyed, but he lets her help because he's trying to search for his planet in his memories that he's getting from the Forerunner artifact. So she narrows his search down and tells him there's 103 planets that fit his description. And then she talks about the hormonal pellet in his spine suppressing everything. And then we cut to Master Chief's naked ass as he cuts his pellet out of his spine with Cortana's help. So, in 20 years, we got one quick second of his shadowed eyes if you do the legendary Halo 4 ending. And in 3 episodes, they show his face and his ass, and he's completely naked. He's a Spartan, so he's supposed to be super athletic and like a physical freak. The actor isn't built like an athlete. He's built like a guy who goes to the gym to look good. Adds insult to injury, I guess, or just insult to insult. Anyway, I'm not sure why this pellet isn't near the neck instead of in the lower spine, but whatever. Kai is watching him do this, and he doesn't see her. She's just hiding off to the side. And then John walks around doing normal things, and we get slow music, so we know he's feeling emotions. And I don't understand a lot of this right here because why does he have free reign to just roam around and do whatever he wants when he just got arrested. And then on top of that, he just took part in a prototype scientific experiment with the Spartans in Cortana. Like, he just wanders off, and I guess he can just do what he wants. And also, they kind of tried to make him look big in the first episode when he was in the ship with Quan. Like, he's clearly a lot bigger than her. And he's like barely fitting in the doorways and stuff. But in this part, he just looks like a slightly tall and shaped guy. He doesn't like dwarf the civilians in the way that he should. In both, the lore and in this show, he's supposed to be tall, like 7 feet tall. And even outside of his armor, he should still be, over 6.5 feet tall and big, like very noticeably big. Like if you saw an NFL defensive end or defensive lineman walking around the street, that's how much he should stick out. But anyway, he's wandering around. He hears music, sees a dog that I guess looks like his in the memories, and then he runs back to the base to go touch the artifact with nobody's permission. And he yells at Cortana to unlock the room. And I'm not sure how she interacts with electronic stuff since she's like brain juice in his brain that I guess is just projecting outside of it. But whatever. So we get more flashbacks, and his dad is obviously a huge douchebag, making him bury his own dead dog because there are no decent men allowed in this fucking show. And he realizes that there's a second part to the artifact. So we go to him in full armor, and he's going to Eridanus 2, which is where he figured out that he grew up with Cortana. And like I said in episode 1, I guess there has to be a time travel component to this because this is the only way that it can make sense. That he's seen both parts of this artifact as a kid and an adult. And Cortana tells him a plague was ravaging the colony, and the UNSC essentially abandoned it and let the plague kill him so it didn't spread to other colonies. So it's assumed his parents are dead. So Halsey shows up and says she'll go with him. And then we cut to Quan trying to steal a ship, and Soren shows up, and she says that Soren can't stop her. And Soren says, well, I could kill you and that would stop you. Which again, I enjoy, that he's just like, fuck off, trying to tell me what to do. And she essentially bribes him with deuterium money, which is the fuel that I guess can only be found on this shithole planet where no one lives. That the UNSC doesn't just take over by force for some reason. And he says, okay, I'll go, and if you can't actually pay me, I'm going to collect your bounty from Venture. So essentially he's going to kill her. We cut again, and Maki calls the Covenant ship and says that they purged all their data, so she's going to go to Madrigal because they don't have anything else to go on. We cut again, and FleetCom got a partial audio log of Sangheili speaking. No clue how this happened since they purged everything and whatever. And Miranda is supposed to translate it because she's a linguist, I guess, on top of being their best technology expert. So I guess she's kind of the just genius of the facility at like 23 years old or however the fuck old she is. So then we cut back to John. Him and Halsey are heading out. Again, no clue why he's allowed to just grab a Pelican and him and Halsey just pick up and go with no permission. No one's watching them. It's all just cool, I guess. I mean, fuck it. He wasn't just in jail or anything and being considered for treason. So creepy Halsey assistant is talking to Halsey and says, if he remembers what happens, he could bring us all down. And she says that's what Cortana's for. And that's it. That's the end of the episode. So yeah, the show, again, really nothing happened outside of some personal drama and some bitching. And I kind of wonder what the message of this show is going to be. Because, I mean, besides that, canon can go fuck itself because it's inconvenient. But as of now, it seems like the main message is you should just be really emotional and yell at people and not stoic or logical or rational. And that's kind of the way the behavior is framed so far, is that the people being rewarded are the ones who are supposed to be like the character that we agree with. And, we have Quan yelling at John, yelling at Soren, getting their way. John is supposed to be a dick in the first episode, and then he starts feeling emotions, and that makes it better. Miranda yells at her dad in front of a bunch of people, and now she's getting like the most access to this Forerunner artifact. So that sort of seems to be the theme right now. And I guess young women are always right, because Maki also kind of threw a tantrum with the prophets, and she got her way. So like every young woman who's thrown a tantrum has gotten her way. I guess that's the message they're trying to send. I don't fucking know. And that's it. This show is just, it's like a sci-fi channel show. The writing is so bad. The exposition is so direct. Everything about it is just average at best. And if this wasn't called Halo, I mean, the numbers I think are pretty bad. I can't imagine what they would be if it wasn't called Halo. So the fact that it's already getting a second season, whew, man. All right, well, that's it. See ya.